In this video, we're going to show you how to replace the water pump and timing belt kit on your Honda Accord. This will be located on the passenger side of the motor. Let's get started. There should be clips all down the front of this front bumper for this splash shield. Go down and remove all of the ones that are attached. We only have zip ties, so we're going to go around and cut all the zip ties to be able to drop the splash shield. Pull the splash shield out of this front and remove it. Open the coolant drain. Be sure you have a bucket under you before doing this and let the coolant start draining. Using a 19mm socket, remove the 5 lug nuts. Remove the wheel. Using a jack, we're going to get under our oil pan right onto the corner and just put a little bit of pressure on there. Using a 15mm wrench, we're going to get on the tensioner pulley, take the tension off. We're going to pull the belt off of the generator. You can let the tension off the tensioner. We're going to fully remove this belt. Using a 10mm socket, we're going to remove the ground strap off of the mount. Don't drop the bolt. Using a 14mm socket, we're going to remove the 2 bolts off the top of the mount. Before removing these top bolts, we're going to break the side bolt free using a 17mm. Get it loose. We'll take our top bolts out. Remove the bolt off the side. Remove the bolt and the mount. Remove the 12mm bolt on the bottom of the tensioner. Pull that bolt out. I'm going to use a 14mm wrench to remove the bottom bolt for the tensioner. This is going to be going through the second pulley. Pull straight up on the power steering reservoir, pull it out of the bracket. We're going to pull this up to the side, out of our way. Fully loosen the bolt and remove the tensioner. Using a 12mm socket, we're going to remove the 2 bolts for the power steering pump. There's one under the pulley in the back. Remove the bolt. There's one more on the top left. Remove the bolt. Pull the power steering pump up and over. You can use a bungee cord and tie it up to keep it out of your way. On our crankshaft pulley, we're going to have 2 sets of marks. There's going to be a set right here. There should be 3 marks. If you keep going to the left, there should be a singular mark. We're going to mark this white. I'm going to use just a little white paint and mark it. We're going to bring that white mark all the way around, going clockwise until we hit the plastic arrow that is marked on the timing cover On the other side of that engine mount, you're going to see that plastic arrow. We're going to turn this crankshaft pulley until we match up that white mark with that arrow. We're using a 19mm socket on the crankshaft pulley bolt. On these top timing covers, you're going to find this little rubber cap. We're going to pull that cap off. We're going to check our alignment of the cams. You can see inside of here there's going to be a little yellow line, and we want that to line up in this plastic embossment in the cover. Once we have these lined up, then we're ready to take our crank bolt out. This one can go just a little bit farther. You want all 3 timing marks to line up, so this front cam, we'll go check the rear cam, and then you want that bottom white mark on the crank pulley lined up with the arrow on the cover. This is the rear cam. You can see it's lined up. If these marks are not lined up, you're going to want to go 360 degrees on your crank pulley until you can find these marks on the cam. I'm going to use a 19mm socket on an impact and remove the crank pulley bolt. Once you take the crank pulley bolt out, double check your timing marks, be sure they're still all lined up, and then remove the crank pulley. We're going to wiggle this side to side until it pops off. Using a 10mm socket, we're going to remove all of the bolts for the top 2 covers. Remove all the bolts in the cover. Do the same thing on the back cover. Pull the wire harness out of the top of the cover, push it to the back, and remove the timing cover. You're going to use a 10mm socket to remove all of the bolts for the lower timing cover. There's one more on the bottom. Do the same thing on the other side of the cover. There's one more 10mm bolt right under this bracket. Using a 10mm socket, remove the bolt for the wire harness out of the bracket. Using a 14mm socket, remove the 3 bolts for the center bracket. There's one more in front of that open one. If you need to, you can remove this mount to get this bolt. There's one more bolt on the bottom. Remove all the bolts and remove the bracket. Using a bolt or the battery tie-down rod, there's a bracket right here that you're going to thread the bolt through until it contacts the tensioner. Do not use a wrench to tighten this. We just need the bolt to be touching the tensioner, so while we take our idler pulley off, the tensioner doesn't spring back. Using a 14mm socket, remove the bolt for the idler pulley. Remove the bolt and the pulley. Remove the crank pulley plate. Remove the timing belt. If you're reinstalling the timing belt and not a new one, you'll want to make marks on this old belt on your timing marks, at least on the top 2 cams. Remove the timing belt. Loosen the bolt, holding tension on the tensioner. Using a 14mm socket, remove the bolt for the tensioner. Remove the bolt and the tensioner. Using a 10mm socket, remove the bolts for the water pump. Be sure you have a bucket under you before removing all of these bolts. When we go to take the water pump off, there will probably be some coolant. Remove the 5 water pump bolts. Crack the water pump free. We're going to let this slowly drain out. Remove the water pump. Be sure that the rubber gasket comes with it. We're going to clean the mating surface for the water pump with a razor blade, getting all of the old corrosion off. We don't want to mar this surface or make any slices. We just want to clean off the old residue. Using some parts cleaner and a clean rag, we're going to spray the rag and then wipe down our mating surface. Be sure the gasket is installed into the water pump. Install the water pump down into place. Go around getting the bolts started. We're going to go around snugging the bolts down. Don't get them really tight, just get them snug. Torque the water pump bolts to 8.7 foot-pounds. Remove the two 10mm bolts for the tensioner. Remove the bolts in the tensioner. Install the new tensioner and get the bolt started. Torque the tensioner bolts to 8.7 foot-pounds. Remove the collar from the old tensioner pulley and install it into the back. Install the bolt through the front, and then install this onto the water pump. Torque the pulley bolt to 19 foot-pounds. Install the bolt into the pulley. We have a shim. On the bottom, you'll see that it's labeled out. We're going to put that down facing our pulley. We're going to put a small dab of thread locker. Install the pulley, but only install it loosely. Install the timing belt. This is going to get routed counterclockwise. Get it on the crank, around the idler pulley. Pull it nice and tight up to our front cam. Install the belt counterclockwise, and we're going to snug down that idler pulley bolt. Torque the idler pulley bolt to 33 foot-pounds. If you can't get a torque wrench on it, do the best you can. Remove the bolt that was holding tension on our tensioner, or the battery tie down if that's what you used. remove the pin for the tensioner. You should be able to just pull on it. Ours was pretty stuck. With the pin pulled on your tensioner, we're gonna go around and double check our timing marks. We're gonna check the timing marks on the cam gears, make sure they still line up, and then go down and check the crank. Install the bracket for the motor mount. Get the bolts started by hand. Snug the bolts down. Torque the bolts to 33 foot-pounds. If you can't get a torque wrench on it, do the best you can. Install the bolt for the wire harness. Snug it down. Get it nice and snug. Install the cover down into place. Get the bolts started. Install the top covers. Get the bolts started. Do the same thing on the rear cover. Get it on, get the bolts started. With all three covers installed and all of the bolts installed, we're going to go around snugging them down. You just want to get them nice and snug. With all the cover bolts tight, we'll go down and start installing the crankshaft pulley. Install the crank plate. Be sure that the curve is facing towards you. Install the crankshaft dampener. Install the pulley bolt. While holding the crankshaft, we're going to torque the bolt to 47 foot-pounds. And then we're going to go 60 degrees. You can make a mark on the bolt. Once you've hit 60 degrees, you're good to go. Pull the power steering pump down. We're going to get the bolts started. Snug the bolts down. Torque the power steering pump bolts to 16 foot-pounds. Install the motor mount. Get the bolts started. Snug the bolts down. Torque the top bolts to 40 foot-pounds. Torque the front bolt to 47 foot-pounds. Install the ground strap and the bolt. Snug the bolt down and torque it to 8 foot-pounds. With our motor mount installed, we can remove the jack from the vehicle. Drop the tensioner down into place and get the bolt started. Get the bottom bolt started. Torque the top bolt to 33 foot-pounds. Torque the bottom bolt to 16 foot-pounds. Pull the belt back over. Be sure it's sitting on all of the pulleys correct. Use our 15mm wrench. Reinstall the belt. Install the power steering reservoir into the bracket. Close the petcock on the radiator. Go through and attach all of the clips for the splash shield. We're going to re-zip tie ours back up. We'll go through and put a few more on here. Install the wheel. Get the lug nut started. Snug the nuts down. Torque the lug nuts to 80 foot-pounds in a star pattern. Install a coolant funnel. Fill the coolant funnel and the radiator until it's full. Have some coolant left in the funnel. Start the car and let it run till it warms up. Once all the bubbles stop coming out of the funnel, go ahead and plug it, remove it, and reinstall the cap, and you're good to go.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.